Doctors, nurses, and hospital staff of Reddit, what are your experiences? Funny, sad, horrible, with people waking from anesthesia? NSFW. So I'm an ER tech, and we have this regular that comes in all the time. She's an old black lady who has a lot of health issues, including dementia. This time, I'm actually not entirely sure why she was coming in, but whatever it was, she needed to be intubated, so we sedated her, put the tube in and did what we needed. When everything was finished, we called EMS to pick her up and take her back home. When they arrived, the nurse and I went in to prep her to leave. The lady is just starting to wake up from sedation, so, with the EMTs standing in the room, we take out her Foley catheter, then, she queefs. The nurse and I smirk at each other, but this is fairly common and not the funny part. The funny part is that the noise seemed to surprise her, and apparently remind her what was going on, because she gasps and then looks over to the EMTs and says in an attempt at a sexy voice, "You boys ever seen a black coochie before?" Everyone in the room had to take a second to attempt to regain composure, but the EMTs ended up having to leave the room and the nurse is crouching on the ground trying not to die. Capital I, since I still have the Foley in my hands, don't have this freedom, and I'm forced to try to keep my sides from launching into orbit. It's since become a running joke around the ER. I'm an anesthesia student currently doing my clinical rotations, and I had an old guy wake up and the first thing he asked was, "Do I still have my balls?" And I told him yep, both of them, and he said both, or you guys are great. I had to get hardware installed in my leg for a nasty bone break at an overseas base. A few days later, my buddy and I were having lunch on base. A group of women came in and sat down at the table next to us and we struck up a conversation. One of them asked what I had gotten done. I was in a huge cast and on crutches. I tell her the procedure. She gets a funny look on her face and asked when it was done. I tell her the date. She immediately starts laughing and tells her friends. This is the guy. Now they're all howling with laughter. It took a while to tell the story because they're in tears from laughing. Apparently, when I was coming out of sedation, I grabbed a woman's ass and hung on for dear life. The woman I was currently talking to at the restaurant. I just wanted to crawl into a hole when I heard the story. TLDR grabbed a girl's ass in the OR, got named Assman by the staff, and became the talk of the hospital for a while. Edit, my top comment is how I perved on some poor woman when I was out of my good on drugs. Wonderful. Additional edit, thank you for the gold. Now I just have to figure out what to do with it. Can I redeem it for Bitcoin? Trade it for beer, perhaps? I once had a patient start totally trashing her sister, telling me how she has always been the black sheep of the family, is a scumbag and wants to bang her husband. She's just going off. And sitting in the doorway was the sister, the only one there to support her after surgery. You could tell it was crushing for her. This was probably an hour after the patient left PACU, conscious but still pretty whacked out. Had a patient in for an endoscopy. As a matter of course, we place a speculum, think ball gag, but a metal ring instead of a ball, in the mouth through which to pass the scope so the patient doesn't bite the scope once they are under. We typically place it right at induction of anesthesia. This patient had the presence of mind to ask us what the safe word was before he lost consciousness as we placed the speculum. One of the rare times the whole OR erupted in laughter. Told to me by my wife, confirmed by the nurse. I was in bed hospital room, waiting for surgery. They already gave me meds to calm me but they knocked me out. Two nurses come in to move me to a gurney but they were small and I'm big, they can't move me over. My wife came over and poked me in the ribs saying you're snoring, roll over, and I rolled right onto the gurney. I was the patient, but I had to get 5 teeth pulled. The nurse was helping my mom shuffle me to the car. I turned to thank her, but couldn't get my mouth to work. So I bowed and doffed an imaginary cap. In anesthesia. Nurse here, this really big, hairy Turkish guy, whom I've never met before, told me how much he loved me and that he wanted to kiss me. I'm male BTW. When my husband woke up from having his wisdom teeth surgically removed, his nurse was a rather large lady, like 350 plus. He looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You're too beautiful to be a nurse. You should have been a model." Why don't you just come home with me and my wife? Yes, he was propositioning a three-way with a 50-year-old 350-pound nurse. Most awkward moment of my life. Patient checking in. I was 18 and just had my appendix removed. My mum was at my bedside. I wake up in more pain from the operation than the appendicitis, and even worse, my balls are itchy. I'm wearing a hospital gown and I'm out of it, so I put my hand on my stomach and run it down to my skin so I can scratch my balls. Obviously not wearing underwear, and my hand runs down in excess of smooth skin. Then suddenly I'm touching my goods. I rummage around and come to the conclusion that someone has shaved my pubes. No one told me this would happen. I was livid. It's the height of visiting hours and I'm shouting in my broad Scottish accent, AWW mum. They've shaved my pubes. I'm no happy about this. I want my pubes back. That's no right. No one told me about this. Get my pubes. My mother was mortified and she's trying to get me to calm down while laughing and trying to avoid a scene. They grew back in about 4 weeks, so it was no biggie, but at the time it was a serious issue. My BFF had a vasectomy, and when he was first given the drugs, 3 nurses walked in that were rather attractive. He looks up with his wife in the room and says, if I would have known there was going to be hot women in here, I would have worn my big D. A patient woke up from his wisdom tooth removal begging the doctor to let him be David Bowie. The doctor actually asked how that was supposed to happen, and the answer was that it would be fantastic. I had a patient pet an invisible kitty that was named after me. The next day, was completely with it and was wondering what happened to that kitty. I was the patient. I'd had all 4 wisdom teeth out at once, and I woke up earlier than expected in recovery, early enough that they hadn't taken out the wadding at the back of my mouth meant to absorb the blood. So I woke up, immediately felt like I was choking, and panicked. I leapt off the bed, and a bunch of nurses came to restrain me. Still out of it, I fought them and definitely gave one of them a good punch before they got me back on the bed. I passed out again straight away. Still feel bad about it. Poor nurse. Not a doc or nurse. When I got my wisdom teeth out, they strapped my arm down for the IV anesthetic. Apparently, before passing out, I looked up at the white-haired German dentist and said in my best Connery, "Goldfinger, do you expect me to talk?" The dentist didn't reply, but he did tell me after surgery that it was one of the funniest things anyone asked him in a haze. Not a hospital staff, but my great-grandfather had surgery one time and I was in the room when he woke up. He was a World War II veteran and was convinced that he was in a Nazi POW camp. He recognized me and told me I had to help him escape by killing the guards, nurses, because he knew I knew how to kill people. I was 16. Obviously a trained killer. When the nurse came in, he was calm and kept motioning with his head at her to me and finally looked at me and said, "Kill her now." She always came back with another male nurse after that. Went straight from the ER to surgery to put a plate in my badly broken arm, so I hadn't been on a ward etc prior to the operation. Came out of surgery and recovery and was being pushed in a hospital bed to a ward. We turned into a ward and it was full of elderly people. I was in my early 20s. I turned to the hospital porter pushing me and shouted, "Sorry, we seem to have taken a wrong turn. We're in the morgue." When I was 14, I had eye surgery. Coming out of anesthesia, the nurses asked me if I could remember my name. I slurred. "My name is Worcestershire sauce." "No, wait, that's not a cool name. My name is Shark." Not the doctor or the nurse. I had a lot of ear infections when I was younger, and my final time, I was about 7. I woke up to the Rugrats on a TV in the room. I hated the Rugrats at the time. Cue the following conversation. Me: "Why are the Rugrats on?" "Doctor, you woke up earlier and said you wanted us to put on the Rugrats. We asked why, and you said that you hated the Rugrats and wanted to watch it so you could be angry." Me: "Why did I want to be angry?" "Doctor, you said you wanted to be angry because you don't like being so happy all the time." Edit. Obligatory wow. One of my most upvoted comments is about my early life angst. Only behind my 5-word comment that referenced a trebuchet. Reddit works in mysterious ways. Tie. My father-in-law was in a car accident that shattered his face, several vertebrae, and his pelvis. This isn't so much a story about what he said, but what he did. He was in a coma for 3 weeks and had to be heavily restrained when coming out of it. He was a Marine in Vietnam. He was captured and escaped, and he still hated being restrained. My wife went to visit him on a Sunday, and the doctors told her that tomorrow he was going to be the first patient to use a new $30,000 restraint system that would cause him less discomfort. On Monday afternoon she visited again, and he was in the same restraints as before. My wife asked, and the nurse explained that he destroyed it restraint system. It lasted less than an hour. It wasn't salvageable. Not a doc, but a few years ago I had my gallbladder removed. 2 stories from that ordeal. 1. Going into surgery, I was being given anesthesia. During this I apparently looked at the tech and asked him to remove the mask from my face so I could scratch my nose. He said no and I passed out halfway OC through my response of all. 2. Still very out of it. Getting ready to be discharged after a day of recovery. It was very bad and I was on a lot of meds. I stood up to change and could feel the incision just below my navel open. I looked down and my hand was red and there was a growing red spot on the gown. I look up and see the color drain from my mother's face. To which I respond, "It's cool. I got this. Get back in the bed." Hit the call button and say, "I don't mean to bother you, but one of my incisions appears to have reopened. I'm not in pain, but there is a fair bit of blood. If you could have someone stop by when they are free, that would be awesome." Not 15 seconds later a nurse comes flying into the room. Looks, says "Holy crap. Be right back" with supplies and flies out of the room before returning and fixing the problem. When asked why I wasn't panicking, I simply responded, "I figured I'm already in the right place for this sort of thing." I'm not a doctor nurse, but I heard about this after my wisdom teeth surgery. I apparently was still on anesthesia, and when they wheeled me out I had both arms stuck out and was making plane noises. They asked me what I was doing and I told them I was becoming my final form of a plane. Still do not know why I was doing it. I was the patient, but I think this qualifies. Colonoscopy. In this big lounge chair, still half asleep in recovery, I half roll over and let rip the biggest fart in history. The devil himself created this one. I open half an eye at the nurse. Ask, "Was that me?" Jaw on the ground, she nods and I go back to sleep. I shadowed a surgery once with this guy who woke up saying, "Give it to me straight, doc. Will I ever play the piano again?" All of us were cracking up and he then goes, "Oh, wait, I don't know how to play the piano." 2 stories. 1. I had a lady in her 70s who drank martinis and took Xanax all day, every day. So she had such a strong tolerance to the sedation I was giving her that she just totally stopped breathing while still awake. I had to say, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to bag you now." And she mouthed okay and I put the ambu bag on her face and force breathed for her until she got her respiratory effort back. 2. I was in helping with a heart procedure and the patient went into complete heart block and his heart stopped beating. I hop up to the table and start chest compressions while they are hurriedly trying to put in a temporary pacing wire. I had an arterial pressure waveform on the monitor, so I could see exactly how hard to do the compressions and the man never lost consciousness. So I'm doing chest compressions on a dude while he looks right at my face the whole time. So it was like press sorry for about 2 minutes until the pacing wire was in place. My first memory when waking up from shoulder surgery was a somewhat panicked nurse rummaging through the blankets at the bottom of my bed repeatedly muttering, "Where are his legs? Where are his legs?" I always cross my legs when I sit lay down and apparently I must have done this as I was initially coming off the anesthesia. It freaked me out for a second, but then I processed what was going on. The nurse seemed relieved when I mumbled "they're right here" and nearly kicked her in the face when I extended my legs. Not a doctor. A friend was in a car crash. Pretty bad. He was in a coma for 2 months. He had a female doctor. For 2 months until he came out of his coma, every time his doctor was checking on he would reach up and grab her breast, guessing he heard her voice. When we told him about he did not believe us. So he asked her and she confirmed it. Said she never stopped him because it seemed to keep him calm. While not medical, I was a prison officer doing an escort for and handcuffed to a prisoner having a minor procedure done under general anesthetic. After the procedure he starts waking up and chatting it. Then he starts telling me about his mobile phone he had smuggled in. the make and model, and how he keeps it plugged in his ass. Edit for those asking. I completed a security report and submitted it to the prison police department. I forget the names, and, as with the prisoner I saw swallowing drugs smuggled in, nothing happened. Edit. It was a small think phone. I think it was the Samsung Duke, around 10 years ago. A finger from a latex glove to wrap it. I was working in the pediatric ER and sedating a skater kid 14 or 15. We are talking more a wannabe suburban kid rather than a punk kinda kid that obviously joined a frat in college. His mom is there in the room as he starts waking up once we had his wrist set and in the cast. His mom is typical well-to-do suburban mom who spends lots of time at yoga and PTA meetings, that is. Not trashy at all, and family was likely from a well-to-do part of town. My buddy, who is fairly hairy on his arms etc, reached across his upper chest to grab an IV line. Kid was half asleep, raised his head up with his eyes still closed and licked my buddy's arm with this exaggerated lick like it was an ice cream cone. Kid flops his head back onto the pillow and his mom just looks mortified in the 2-3 seconds that pass before he slurs out, "Man, I sure do love to lick some pussy." His mom immediately turned bright red and walked out of the room, and we all busted out laughing except the guy who got licked. The ER doc was this young petite girl and she said she peed herself a little, she was laughing so hard. For months we would give that guy lick motions in the air when we passed him in the hall and putting Rolling Stone stickers on his locker etc. I still give him crap about that from time to time. My favorite is to catch him chatting or something standing at the desk and to lean over and sniff his forearm and ask if he has been fishing. I got my wisdom teeth out last month and was curiously subdued. My wife informed me, at least at the office. She loaded me up in the car and away we went. About halfway home, she called my mother to let her know that the surgery went well, and I remained stonily quiet. After she got off the phone, I demanded that my wife call my mother back. When she did so, I told her, "Mom, you have lots of dogs, and they need lots of love." Then I made the cut the call motion to my wife. When we arrived home, I was brought up short by my wife's pillowcase, which has a sloth on it. I asked out loud, "Honey, there's a duck-in sloth in here. How did we catch one? They're so fast." Then she tried to take my jeans off of me so I could go to sleep, and I yelled, "Were they missy?" when she grabbed for the fly. All in all, a pretty great morning. I have a nice sister of a friend story. She was getting her wisdom teeth removed, and after they took them out, they just sewed up the holes they were in. Now, she came out of anesthesia, but she was still groggy and like super high. While they were in the car going home, she reached into her mouth, touched the stumps and got blood on her fingers, and then reached up and gave her the double football striped look, pulled her blanket over her head, and said, "I'm a warrior." The friend who told me this was laughing for a good 5 minutes after she told me this. Just thought I might share it. Well, duck it. I got nothing better to do, so let's share the story about the other sister when she got her wisdom teeth removed. This one's not quite as funny, but here goes. Some backstory. Her family is from French Canada and she lived there until 6 years old. She vividly remembers waking up from surgery, sobbing. When questioned why she was crying, she explained in French that she missed her homeland of Canada and wanted the snow. Then she stopped crying and started apologizing. She is the most Canadian person I know. After waking up from my wisdom tooth surgery, I remember asking my mom I didn't fart. Did I? I had a bunch of gas before the surgery and now it's gone. I hope I didn't fart in front of the cute nurse. Cute nurse is behind me during the whole speech. Welp. 3 times. The first time when I was 5. Tonsil surgery. My family is from Norway, and my grandmother always kept a pewter model of a longboat on her mantle. Just to explain why a 5-year-old would wake up screaming, "Get me back to the longboat." And then apparently, to quote my mother, go all Linda Blair on the doctors when they came in to try to give me antibiotics. That was nearly 25 years ago and my family still likes to joke about me managing to shriek my head off and throw punches after having just come out of throat surgery. By age 13, I tamed down some, and apparently only muttered angrily at everyone while waking up. Age 26, all the fight had gone out of me, and I just cried whenever a nurse asked me a question. "How is your pain?" Not bad. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Can you sit up for me? Uncontrollable sobbing. Okay then. Let's get you some apple juice. Fully disconsolate. Edit because I can't count. Wish I was earlier to this one. My fiancée recently had her tonsils removed. Her mother and I were there when she woke up. After a few minutes she told her mother, now that I've got my tonsils out, I can fit more of his D in my mouth. It was awkward. I had my wisdom teeth removed about a month ago and apparently when I woke up I said wowie. That's some good it. I had surgery on my wrist and came out of anesthesia screaming my balls hurt. The doctor came in and asked what was wrong. I said my balls hurt. He replied, dude, you had wrist surgery. No one touched your balls. Once I woke up asking if the ends justify the means. Once I went under while reminding all the women in the room that the room is very cold and they shouldn't judge. Not a doctor or nurse. When my sister was 16, she had back surgery to repair a ruptured disc in her lower back. Apparently, the meds that they gave her before she was put under gave her low enough inhibitions that instead of counting backward from 10, she started belting out the lyrics to Roxanne. The staff later told my mom that not only were they amazed that someone that young knew the lyrics, that the way that she started singing was one of the funniest things they had seen in an hour. Came out of anesthetic and the lead nurse decides it's time to tell me all about post-op care. She says, now this is going to be a pain in the ass. And I said, if that's the case, then you guys performed the wrong procedure. It was a nose operation. The assistant nurse started laughing. Lead nurse not so amused. When I got my wisdom teeth out, I apparently called my Middle Eastern surgeon a sly Arabian tooth thief after coming to. That was fun to learn about when I regained mental clarity. Not a professional, medical or otherwise, but on the way home from the dentist I was gone and something in my mind remembered Metal Gear Solid and I started yelling the Qui-I the last snake. Apparently I almost caused my mom to crash the car and it quickly became annoying very fast as one could imagine. I was coming around from surgery and the nurse who was looking after me had a crush on a guy I dated when I first started nursing, several years before. It was rather surreal to go from deep sleep to talking about an ex-boyfriend I had hardly thought about in years. I almost feel it was an abuse of her power. I could have said anything coming out. You don't expect to be interrogated about a past relationship the first thing waking up from major surgery. In the end I found out some gossip. The relationship didn't last long and apparently he was hurt that I wasn't devastated when we broke up and that I started dating someone new within a few weeks. Got told the story. When I was 8, I got a knee surgery. While on anesthesia, the travel between my hospital room and the OR tough I was in a Formula 1 car. So I would make all the noise, telling people to faster, make the sound of the tires too. The guys told my mom it was the funniest transfer they ever had. Everybody was laughing including people in the hallway. Friend of mine woke up and asked all the nurses to smoke a bowl with him. I'm not a medical professional in this story. My husband had emergency surgery a few years ago and when he woke up, he was just different. I can't explain it. He recognized who I was, but his personality was completely different and the way he spoke to me was completely different. It's sort of like in movies where people wake up in someone else's body. It freaked me the duck out. 36 hours later, it was like he just woke up and was himself again. The weird part is, he had no memory of the past 36 hours. He remembers being sick and he remembers the emergency room. But after that, nothing. A lot of people came to visit him in that time period too. A bunch of family and everyone from the office and he has no memory of any of them. The only thing I can think is that whatever medication that was used in the anesthesia that gawked him finally worked its way out of his system. 2011 I had a hernia surgery. Don't remember this but was told I woke up exclaiming how f***ed up I was. Wanted to know what they had given me and if I could purchase some. I woke up from knee surgery and demanded a vodka and coke with no ice. Also for some reason when I woke up I was freezing cold and shivering. One of the nurses hooked me up to some heater which blew warm air under the covers from the bottom of the bed. I then likened myself to Marilyn Monroe. I'm a 6'2" athletic guy. The only thing I could think of as the patient was that I surprised a lot of nurses with how quickly I shook off the anesthetic. I would be walking around an hour later and getting changed ready to go home. They just looked dumbfounded. Not me. A male friend broke his nose, which was a bit off to begin with, and asked the doctor to not give him a cosmetic operation, only functional since he couldn't breathe well. Before the operation, a nurse had him stripped to put the operation robe on. While high on anesthesia, he proceeds to brag about his D and tell the nurse how hot she is, to which he only laughs. Operation goes well. The doctor, however, once he cut the nose bridge or whatever and placed the nose in its new place, thought the cosmetic one looked too good to not be done. So he did it anyways. Friend wakes up, sees his nose in a mirror pointing upwards, starts to get real angry, almost punching the mirror, until the hot nurse came in. Next words were, "Hee how you like my new 6-ear nose?" There was another male nurse on the room. After trying to hit on the female nurse, patient said to him, "Hey, I'm really hungry. Come bring us a pizza and I'll pay you later." Guys, game even while high. Edit. Added last part about the pizza. While on fentanyl for gallstones in the ER, I asked the ultrasound tech if she wanted to take a selfie with me. She declined and I got butthurt about it. Apparently I also told my sweet grandmother, when asked if I was okay, that I was fine, Gran. I'm high as giraffe balls. Not a nurse, but I have a good one. It's been 15 years and I'm still horrified when I think about it. I have to preface this story by saying that I have a super conservative, girl next door type of personality. I am shy, somewhat of an introvert, and most definitely never want to be the center of attention on purpose. I went in for a colonoscopy with the yum yum juice that made me forget everything that happened. Although I vaguely remember talking and hearing laughter. When I woke up, people were smirking and glancing at each other, trying to suppress their laughter. I asked if something happened and the staff reassured me that everything was good. So when the doctor came in to talk to me before I was released, I asked him if something funny had happened. He reassured me that I had a very normal procedure and then told me that sometimes the medication caused people to lower their inhibitions, but that the effect wore off very quickly, as does the medication. I asked him what he meant by lowering their inhibitions and he paused again and reassured me that it happens to a lot of people. So yeah, I spent my entire colonoscopy talking dirty to my doctor and his tools. I never went back to that doctor again. TLDR. Yum yum juice made me say dirty things to the doctor, change doctors and considered moving out of state due to my humiliation. Edit. Because grammar.